It's an amazing experience to be able to go into a courtroom and instead of just taking notes and observing it as you would as an individual, but to be able to record it, to have it as a television program, and for the audience to see it. Because most of the time, most of the stories that I get to work on, and certainly most of the past stories here at the Fifth Estate, we just didn't have access to the courtroom. So we had to rely on descriptions, really, or interviewing people after the fact. And so often, people aren't willing to be interviewed after the fact. So we have a lot of missing bits and pieces. In this particular case, for example, the police and the prosecution, they weren't willing to be interviewed. So we do have their testimony in front of the bail hearing, so we get that part of the story. We get sometimes balance and sometimes content that we would never otherwise get. Well, a lot of people think that if you have a camera in the courtroom, especially people in Canada, that it's going to be intimidating to witnesses, or it's going to encourage grandstanding by the defense lawyer or by the prosecution. We've always heard discussion about Judge Judy and this kind of exaggerated behavior that can sometimes go on in a courtroom. When you're actually there and when you're actually seeing it, it almost never ever comes up to that kind of an expectation. It's normal. It's pretty much the same thing that you'd see in a courtroom in Canada without a camera going. It's people get used to having a camera there so quickly. It becomes just part of the background. The same way that we have a microphone in a courtroom that records for the purposes of the court. Now it's a microphone that is ultimately going to be videotaped. So it really, although it's a novelty at first, you get used to it so quickly. And I can tell you that the defense lawyers and the prosecution, the judges in Florida, they are completely used to having a camera there. It's no more interest to them than any other thing that's going on in the courtroom that day. In Canada, the CBC and the private broadcasters have tried very hard to persuade the courts, to persuade the powers that be, that they should allow cameras in the courtroom. Just even on a trial basis. Let's do it for a year or so in a particular location or other. We've never really been able to get to first base on this. There's such a reticence in Canada. There's so much fear that it's going to lead to a sort of kind of grandstanding, or it's going to intimidate witnesses, or somehow or another it's going to make our process more American. I think that's the single big fear. The reality is that there's so many trials that we will never cover. We will never give them any coverage whatsoever if we don't have a camera there. And there's a huge number of stories that the audience is missing out on, that we can sometimes provide coverage after the fact, but not always. If you look at those little page 5 stories or page 10 stories, and you think, wow, that could have been a lot more interesting. There must be a lot more to that. Well, there is, but you wouldn't see it unless there was a camera there.